as promised in my one for all 1,000,000% explained video, I'm finally here with the full breakdown on the power of All Might and One for All, now that it has premiered and concluded in the anime. I've heard some laughably cancerous things about All Might's strength over the years, and many people have very diverse perspectives on how these intense powers should be calculated and play out. Luckily, nothing like what the few fandoms in our community drool out when hype, takes over, but nonetheless pretty faulty. So let's go over the strength of Yagi Toshinori and his endeavors as the #1 hero of his time. I am going to be somewhat verbose in this video when it comes to the calculations. I'll try to keep it a little not so number-esque, but All Might is heavily underestimated in some categories, and I do have to make a statement where it is appropriate. To start things off, I think it should be grandstanded that to calculate consistently, we need to go mainly off of feats rather than statements given by characters. Pretty common sense, but I'll go into more detail for those that disagree. In the encounter with All for One, Midoriya states that he can run over to Bakugo in less than a second, who's over 6 to 7 meters away, if he uses full cowl to save him from the League of Villains trying to kidnap him again. This translates to about 7 meters per second, give or take, which is literally around 15 miles per hour. To show how this internal analysis of Deku's is even more ridiculous beyond just 15 miles per hour, it should be noted that at the very start of the series, around chapter 6, all the heroes have to do a 50-meter sprint, in which Deku runs the 50-meter sprint in around 7 seconds. Once again, translating to around 15 miles per hour, which is actually slower than speeds people in real life can run pretty commonly, actually. So unless All for One era Deku full cowl is equal to the start of series base Deku, these calculations can't really be used or to show why it's impressive or to an anti-feat per se. Midoriya seems to have a lot of statements that shouldn't be taken literally and are somewhat vague as well, as admitted by My Hero Academia's author Horikoshi when concerning 1,000,000% One for All and how opaque it was. This scene was also then followed up by All for One stating it shouldn't have taken 30 seconds for All Might to travel to him after he unleashed the Noumus. Even though All Might did delay and stick around for quite a bit after the Noumus were initially released, there's even a guidebook that says some nonsense like All Might is as fast as a bullet train, even though technically a bullet train cannot travel that fast in 30 seconds, and this was referring to a much stronger All Might as well. 30 seconds and 5 kilometers was also supposed to be a direct comparison narratively to Deku being able to go a few meters in less than a second, although mathematically it simply does not work. So you can see why these statements are a bit bizarre at times, and they also ridiculously lowball the characters, even sometimes lowballing them to just athlete level at best, which I don't know about you, but I have never seen anybody that can only run 15 miles per hour do anything like this before. From this point on, there's going to be a lot of sciences and math behind each of All Might's feats, since we aren't really considering statements all too much for My Hero Academia at this point. We are still considering statements at their cores, like say what the property of a quirk should be. After all, the feats we can then go into how strong All Might should be at his prime, which is something people really seem to gripe about for whatever reason. In the story, Bakugo is captured by the League of Villains, with Deku and gang following in pursuit. This situation is then interrupted by All Might going full Kool-Aid Man on the League and basically bullying all of them in an instant with the help of a few heroes like Kamui Woods and Gran Torino. They're eventually saved by All for One, who challenges All Might to a fight. However, this whole fight says nothing about either All for One or All Might, as All Might is then suggested to actually be holding back as to not hurt Bakugo, and still holding back even after he's gone to not hurt the civilians nearby. And by the time All Might is actually able to unleash his full power, he's so fatigued he's not even able to maintain his Chad form. What's really interesting about all of this is the scale of attacks that All for One hits All Might with before All Might is even allowed to properly defend himself. With a casual punch, All for One blasted Toshinori, and with it a large portion of the Kamino district, with All Might completely stopping and nullifying a massive portion of energy from going behind behind him. I'll throw the exact math here on the screen, but basically the manga panel showing this scene is showing All Might protecting around 470,000 plus meters cubed of area based off of the pixel scalings of the windows of the background and using a basic angle calculator. We can then fairly assume that the buildings are all made of something common like granite. From here, we can then apply how much force it would take to vaporize this much granite and how strong All Might would have to be to nullify this with sheer force, in the words of All For One. Granite weighs around 2,750 kilograms or 6,000 pounds meters cubed. Granite then has a vaporization value of around 6 million plus joules per kilogram. Considering the entire area of granite would be vaporized, if not for All Might blocking it, the energy output would be around 7.8 quadrillion joules of energy, or 10 to the 15, which is enough to destroy, say, a small city, possibly one like Portland, Oregon, or something similar. The attack is basically the equivalent of a highly condensed 6 megaton nuke or a massive payload of TNT, and All Might blocks it without even using that Chad form I talked about earlier. And while All For One then states he's also holding back just to wither down All Might from a distance, he's not even going all out himself. I went with the vaporization calc because, as shown with the concrete and its underlyings being shown fully on screen surrounded by smoke and only buildings in the background being blown over, with All Might defending a citizen with only one hand as well as a lot of land, usually when something is simply blown away rather than vaporized, it'd be shown piled up together around the borders, like say when Pain blew away Konoha in Naruto Shippuden with Shinra Tensei. But with this, there's no such hints. This form of vaporization is then constantly shown throughout the fight as well. And this is only with All Might holding back, as he's able to fight an All For One who then amplifies all of his kinetic and muscular energy by 3 through 4 times over, possibly stacking them on top of each other. And All Might then counters this energy and even has it all reflected back at him in the clash, and his arm remains intact enough to keep moving, meaning that a force of around 18 through 24 megatons isn't even out of skinny All Might's pay grade. When he was a lot stronger, before this whole All For One shenanigan where he lost a lot of his powers trying to defend citizens in the background, he's actually able to generate thunderstorms with singular punches and sometimes by simply moving. This may not seem like much, as a lot of characters manipulate the weather in fiction these days, but when looking at it under a critical lens, you realize just how impressive this really is. For example, the total energy released through cloud/rain formations can surpass the total worldwide electrical generating capacity hundreds of times over. Some calculations could even convert these joules into straight up tens of thousands of megatons or a dozen gigatons of TNT, give or take, which many of the strongest nuclear bombs of today only being like 50 or so plus megatons. This is a pretty ridiculous amount of energy for something that's so common throughout the day for some people, and that everyone makes a lot of light of, because obviously it's just so common it isn't as impressive as, say, big booms or nuclear mushroom clouds or etc. All Might is capable of causing these thunderstorms, which also include massive amounts of energy. Whether he directly creates or causes the thunderstorms is irrelevant. Either way, he has to shove through massive portions of air with a lot of force for the storm to occur. There's a pretty popular calc that I myself did not make, but it goes over when All Might punch slime in, which he brings in a lot of loud raining dark cumulonimbus clouds. All Might then brings in these true storm clouds, which range from 13 kilometers tall in around 13 seconds when they were never even in sight beforehand, which should be obvious as the author was going for this to begin with. These clouds should weigh around 900 million kilograms plus, assuming the horizon is around 4.7 kilometers, which should give us around 14 megatons of force, which is not too much better than the feat he had versus All For One when he was so weakened he couldn't even use his Chad form. Although some calculations then came out actually suggesting the horizon distance is almost 15 kilometers, since the previous one didn't actually utilize observer height, which would then give us 1.31 gigatons of TNT. I will leave that link to that calculation in the description below. I didn't make that, although I did have to make a few more calculations that you will be seeing here, so unfortunately I can't link those in the description as well, because obviously I made them. Unless you guys want me to make like a Google Doc, if you want to, just let me know. But other than that, this means All Might, who is actually actually weakened versus slime, and overextending his power would be around larger mountain levels. So skinny All Might can destroy cities, and buff All Might can destroy large mountains. Seems about right. But what about speed? Speed feats, as I described earlier, seem to be pretty iffy or misdirected, which I don't blame the author or think the story is any worse for doing so, but it is important to understand that a lot more people understand big boom equals what big boom booms than 8,342 Mach is more impressive than lightning speed or something. Ironically though, despite All Might nagging, All Might's speed is actually his most impressive trait. All Might can easily be scalable to be faster than the attacks of the naval laser or the impressive light absorbing attacks of 13's black hole quirk. But sometimes lasers can be an unquantifiable thing in fiction, with fiction sometimes downplaying lasers to be more so a style of attack rather than an actual light concept. If you think the naval laser shouldn't be light speed that 13 scales to, we can go over more confirmed speeds and statements for attacks such as Bakugo's nitroglycerin explosions. In the anime, a suppressed and weighted All Might, if you go frame by frame, actually dodges and blitzes one of these explosions from Bakugo with his massive body before the explosion can even really go anywhere. Using two guides produced by the US Park Ranger Service and US Army Corps of Engineers, 60% weighted dynamite gives us 19,000 feet per second as a speed. Taking into account returns from 20 weight up to 60 dry weight, with pure nitro giving us 27,000 feet per second. Even older sticks of gelatin molded dynamite go to 24,000 FPS, so this isn't really a stretch. If we take the explosion in perspective to All Might moving 1 centimeter or 1 millimeter per second to All Might moving around 3 meters per second on screen to shift his entire body around the explosion, we can calculate his speed to be around a 3,000 times difference, which would be around 8,100,000 feet per second, or Mach 7,197, which is 0.008% the speed of light. If we highball this to the explosion moving practically nowhere when All Might moves, say like 1 millimeter, this would be about 0.08 times light speed for weighted All Might. Not to mention that he can enhance his powers many times over, and that he never uses 100% for movement alone, since if he does, it can cause storms, as stated later on when he's training to use One for All more effectively with Midoriya, and it's actually hinted that All Might uses 20% when moving more casually, or implied to be so. So either gathering that All Might should easily be able to hit the 4% light speed ballpark when unweighted and low on All for One isn't out of range here. A 4% light speed, for those that don't know, is essentially fast enough to travel around the Earth in around 3 to 4 seconds, give or take, which is pretty fast for someone with his level of power, considering most characters of that tier are usually in the hypersonic ranges or lightning timers and so on. You could even scale All Might to another fast and light character, who is Mirio. Mirio, for those who don't know, travels using a phenomenon known as quantum tunneling. Mirio uses this physical overlap to seemingly teleport in battles and take advantages. To go into more detail, every particle in the universe has a chance to be anywhere in the universe at any given time. Yes, including all of your particles. Quantum tunneling is when that particle simply chooses to be somewhere else. Everything has a wavelength of possible locations it can appear at. Sometimes this wavelength can also be inside and travel through an object, a particle, or etc. doesn't have the kinetic energy to actually pass through or be in. Therefore, it'll appear at the end of this barrier at speeds faster than the speed of light. This light speed testing is tested by having 2 tracks, one with a barrier and one without, and testing the location of the wavelengths after the test, in which quantum tunneling exceeds the wavelengths going at the speed of light due to teleporting through an area. Many research studies suggest it's possible for quantum tunneling to be a finite speed, in which it's tested to be around the attosecond ranges at the high end, which is basically how long it takes for light to travel across an atom. The well-known attosecond flash meme I'm going to put on the screen here, I think, explains just how impressive this actually is. A lot of people think quantum tunneling doesn't exist. There are debates about it. Some people think it does, some people think it doesn't. It's basically like an in real life glitch, like you would see in a video game, so it's pretty crazy. It kind of breaks some forms of logic. However, the story itself is showing that it does believe in this science, so we can't actually use it here. Mirio then implies that his teleportation can be reacted to as Deku attempts to kick him right after he teleports. Although it turns out that Deku was simply predicting where he would appear rather than actually reacting to the teleport. Although it's still interesting to point out, especially when you consider that many characters in the series have abilities that mess with light to a degree. Regardless, whether you agree with that or not, he should still be sub-relativistic to light, even lowballing. And that's how strong and fast All Might is, at least the one that we know most people know of, but there's more to All Might than just that. The death of Toshinori's master Shimura left a gaping hole in him, literally and metaphorically. This hole would seethe with anger and vengeance that would eventually cause his downfall as the successor of One For All, and sap his strength so gradually that we'd have to abandon it and quickly choose a new successor. This weakened All Might is the one that we just scaled and have grown to love throughout the series. A lot of people I know of instantly jump into the Prime All Might is 60% stronger than normal bandwagon based off of All Might saying that would only have taken 5 punches as opposed to 300 to defeat Noumu if he were in his prime. However, they also seem to forget that there's another way to look at it and that both options could technically be correct. And that is that All Might wasn't at 100% versus Noumu. He is in fact beyond 100% for at least half of those 300 punches that they exchanged. To get into this, it should be noted that One For All's power is directly linked to his time limit at this stage in the game. The more time he has, the stronger One For All is. So for instance, 3-hour All Might has a lot more One For All and power to utilize than 30-minute All Might. And this was also confirmed by Shigaraki, who then says, "Is it true that you're getting weaker?" In the fight versus Noumu about halfway through, he decides to use beyond 100% of his power, which Shigaraki then refers to as a cheat code, which this beyond 100% power then gives a flashback to All Might versus Slime, which implies one of two things: that All Might is amping himself to have the power to be as strong as he was during his 3-hour time limit, or he amped himself versus Slime. Amping himself versus Slime is unlikely, as if anything, he was trying not to hurt Bakugo, who was trapped by Slime, which points to him more so powering himself up to the way he was with a 3-hour time limit, as he also wasn't even using the same technique versus Slime either. If the time limit of One For All is just the amount of it inside your body, I think it's fair to say that All Might's growth is linear with his time limit. This is backed up when he's struggling to block a small city level attacks when his time limit is almost up, and can casually slap out large mountain level attacks when he has a solid time limit, with the difference being a few megatons to a solid gigaton plus a force. So if we assume vaguely halfway through the struggle to be 150 punches and the other 150 to be at around like 600%, which would be the equivalent of 900, this would mean he punches Noumu with the equivalent of 1050 100% punches, in which he stated that in his prime it would just take 5 at most at 100%. For those of you who don't like this form of scaling All Might, I'll oblige you as well. I won't grandstand. I did say earlier you can do it either way. I'm just giving a different route to how Prime All Might can be approached, because people seem to take that right off the bat without seem to be thinking about it critically to any degree. So lowballing Prime is 60% stronger and highballing is like 210 times stronger. It's good to create a scale like this, as it was stated he threw over 300 punches anyway, meaning 60 times is without a doubt wrong, just a valid assumption to have in the face of lacking evidence and clarity from All Might himself. This would have Prime All Might's final stats as such. Lowballing, he has the ability to destroy or attack potency to destroy a large island and beyond, or 78.73 gigatons of TNTs of force, and 2.4 times faster than light, or around 48% as fast if we disregard All Might usually traveling with 20% and clearly suppressing himself while weighted versus Bakugo, with highballing being something like the ability to destroy or attack potency to destroy a country, or 16.5 teratons of TNTs of force, and 8.4 times faster than light, with its speeds being way higher if you take into account the naval laser 13 and Mirio's quantum tunneling theory. Though as you can see, All Might is a ridiculous powerhouse compared to the rest of My Hero Academia, and pretty strong compared to a lot of other popular shonen slithering around these days. And honestly, I think people underestimate him a little too much, especially especially in the speed department. Even outside of power, he has some cool resistance to hacks, such as the ability to resist and change fate itself, so long as he or even Deku desire it with all their being. Some people will argue, though, that this is actually resistance to foresight. However, it is confirmed many times over that the foresight is never wrong, even concerning many things with All Might, and that All Might and sometimes the energies of all those around him that desire him to win literally causes him to change the fate strip itself. Unfortunately, All Might is gone, and he was by far my favorite part of the series, along with All for One. Hopefully we get some flashback arcs or something of All Might in his prime to compare to Deku when he starts to surpass what All Might was. Either way, All for One is still a player to return at any time, so that's always cool to think about. Prison Break arc. Anyways, guys, hope you enjoyed. Put a lot of effort into this one, so if you did enjoy it, be sure to like and maybe try out my Discord if you want to dive more into my community and so on. And other than that, till next time, eat my fucking nut.